Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 53. That's right, it is episode 1 of season 2, but we'll call it 53, right?
Yes, please.
Right, we're the podcast where we talk about photography, videography, making photos, making videos, and everything that's got anything to do with any of that. And also, in season 2, of course, we've got lots of really awesome guests lined up again. And today, without further ado, we are going to be talking to none other than Mark Wallace himself. You might know him as the face of Adorama TV, but Mark is a commercial fashion photographer, educator, solo motorcycle circumnavigator, and the man who taught me everything I know about speedlights.
Yes. Wow.
Mark,
I did not know that. I'm fantastic. I'm so glad to be here. I love your podcast. So I'm really stoked to be joining you guys today.
Wicked.
Thank you, Ben.
Mark, you are on the road, literally, at the moment. So tell us where you are at this very moment.
Right now, I'm in Cartagena, Colombia, and I've been traveling since 2014 full time. So I sold everything, almost everything, in the United States, my house, and shut down the studio, all that stuff. And then I traveled for about 2 years, planes, trains, and automobiles, all that stuff. And then in 2016, I went back to the United States and I got a motorcycle, and I really wanted to circumnavigate the world. I actually wanted to ride through every single continent except Antarctica. And so I did that. I think I finished in 2018. Yeah, late 2018. And then I just kept going. And so unfortunately, all the borders are closed. And because of the pandemic and all of that, I've tried everything possible, and it looks like the trip is coming to an end in about 3 weeks. I have to go back to the United States. There's just no more borders that are open, and Colombia is kicking me out. They're like, you've been here long enough. So I'll be back in the United States in less than a month, actually, about 3 weeks.
So what is the situation in Colombia like at the moment? Are the numbers rising, or what's the situation there, COVID-wise?
Well, right now it's we just had Holy Week, and so in Latin America, that's a big family gathering time, and so of course numbers went up for that. And then it really depends on the part of Colombia that you're in. So in the northern part of the Caribbean, in Santa Marta and Barranquilla, it's not great. Occupancy rates are about 85% for the hospitals, some up to 90%, and so there are quarantines and travel restrictions and things like that. In Bogota and in Medellin, they've got even stricter quarantines. And so, there's some pretty heavy duty lockdowns depending on the cities that you're in.
Wow. So do you think, perhaps in a year's time, when hopefully things are getting back to slight normal, you'll go back, you'll start traveling again?
I think so. Yeah. There's, I've got some pretty big projects on the horizon starting in 3 weeks. And that's going to take me about a year to finish that work. So I partnered with Creative Live to bring a new curriculum to the platform. So I just had a meeting with Chase yesterday, I guess. And so we went through all of that, Chase Jarvis, sorry. So I think we're doing, I'm going to be creating about 12 new classes. So one per month or maybe one every 3 weeks for Creative Live. And it's an entire curriculum of Photoshop, Lightroom, digital photography basics, and lighting basics, speed lights, strobes, constant lights. And it's I'm creating it out of all the content that I've created over the past 15 or so years. And so it's sort of my master class and a gift to the world. So that's going to be really exciting. I was just working through all of that this morning. That starts, I'll be in the studio in 3.5 weeks, I think, to start shooting the first class. And so, it's sort of that time in life where I need to take a little bit of a break. I haven't been to the United States for more than a couple months since 2014. So, I don't know, it's going to be a culture shock, a reverse culture shock for sure. Every time I'm back in the States or in Europe, it's very strange to me. And so I've talked to several other travelers that have gone for extended periods of times, and they're like, watch out, because it's going to be as difficult coming back as it was leaving, and perhaps even more difficult psychologically. So that's going to be an interesting time, I think. So I'll be writing about it, and of course updating videos and stuff to sort of explain all that stuff. But that's what's happening. It's a lot.
Do you think it's going to be difficult because you're sort of going back into American culture, or do you think it's going to be tricky because by the nature of the way that you travel on a motorbike, you're on your own for quite long periods of time, I guess. Do you think?
I think yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think both of those things are true. I mean, there's the psychology of coming back to the United States, because culturally, I think I've changed as a person. In the United States, we define success as either somebody that's got a lot of money, somebody that has a lot of power, or somebody that has a lot of fame. Those are really the three ways that we define a successful person. And even if you look at podcasts and blogs and things about photography, that's how we define a successful photographer. How many views do they have? How many followers do they have? How much money have they made? And I don't really necessarily agree with that anymore. And so to try to merge some of the values that I now have with the values that I grew up with, I think will be a little bit difficult. And also going back to a country that's very wealthy is sort of a shock, because I've been living in countries that some of them are impoverished, some of them have vastly different cultural values, so not quite as materialistic, not even close to being quite as materialistic. And so it's almost, I wouldn't say offensive, but it's almost offensive to go back and see these giant, what I used to think were normal sized houses. But now I think, oh my gosh, why would anybody need all this stuff? The problems that people tend to deal with, their Starbucks was the wrong flavor. They didn't get their food fast enough. They can't find a parking place. Their car is not the newest. Just these annoyances that I've had all my life, but now see as sort of this weird thing. Like, why are you upset about that? You've got a family, you've got safety, you've got, what you need. Why is this a thing? And so adjusting to those kind of realities will be difficult. And then also every time I've gone back, I find myself at the beginning going, why are people upset about this stuff? And then 2 weeks in, I'm like, my Starbucks isn't hot enough. And I'm right back where I started. And then I'm offended with myself. I'm like, I thought I was better than this. And it turns out I'm not. So it's all of that stuff.
It's funny you mention that, because, these are the kind of things I'm desperately trying to teach my kids. And I have like 3 kids, and they're aged between 9 and 18. And especially like my 2 older ones.
Wait. Did you say 9 and 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so my youngest is 9, and then I have 2 stepkids, and they are 17 and 18. And and they are obviously teenagers, and so they're like fully sort of involved in, in their culture, basically. And so, the amount of times that they get really annoyed or upset about something and rant on about something, where you just have to pull them back and go guys, this is like, first world problems right here. I mean,
sure.
And we're desperately trying to kind of reel them back, and so we're kind of, we're hoping that, and of course the last couple of years haven't been great for them in terms of like getting out and seeing the world, because of course we've been totally locked down over here in the UK for the last year at least. So, we're trying to make sure that they, get out and see other things for a change, so they actually get more of a perspective,
And that's the key word, isn't it? I think perspective.
Yeah,
it
for sure.
really is. I remember.
I'm curious, does the 18-year-old have different perspectives than the 9-year-old? I mean, do they look at the same thing and go, this is this, and no?
Yes, the really interesting thing is that, the older ones are really full. They're really, it's like, I feel like sometimes I have to like catch them with a lasso and pull them back out of the swamp of like first world problems, And but the 9-year-old, she's starting to kind of get drawn into it, into all of that, and because she likes to emulate what she sees the older ones do, and she started watching YouTube. Bad mistake, because she's not watching our channel, but there you go. So but it's you can see it happening, you know what I mean, like week on week you can see it happening. And so as parents, we're trying to because we're such a we call it a patchwork family. Like, you know, my wife's Canadian, I'm German. You know, we bring lots of different, culturally, we bring different things together. And so we're trying to kind of, it's hard, you know, it's hard to explain. We're trying to kind of make sure that they have a slightly wider perspective than just the little spot that they live in. It's just hard.
Yeah, that's always, there's I forgot the scientist, but there's a theory called the Umwelt. It's actually a word. I think it's Swedish or something, but
that's German.
Is it German? Okay.
Yeah.
So you would know, but it's the way that we perceive the environment around us. And so if you take a normal room and you put a dog in that room, and you put a person in that room, you put a blind person in that room, and you put a bird in that room, they're all in the same room, but they're going to perceive that same exact space in 4 totally different ways. And so part of the reason that I wanted to travel, and it's to, you know, what you're doing with your kids, is to expand that Umwelt. So you can try to understand what that might be like from a person that's from a different religious background or cultural background or different age, to have some more understanding. It makes you a better person, I think, and also makes you a better storyteller, because you're not so narrowly focused on your own point of view that you can't see the other things in the space.
If you could time travel back, and like you've been on the road for like 6 years, 7 years, you know, something like that, you said, if you could time travel back and meet up with, you know, the Mark from 6 years ago, what would you tell him?
Chill out, dude. You know, I would have a lot of different things to say to that Mark, but I don't think that Mark would really pay attention to the older Mark. That's the issue with life, you know. Wisdom is learning from other people's experience, and either you can or you can't. You know, there's an old phrase in the New Testament. Jesus used to say, "For him who has ears to hear." And you know, I grew up. My dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, and so I heard all this New Testament stuff, and I'm like, "What the heck does that mean?" I never understood why is he saying that? And now I'm much older. You know, in my older years, I get it. Like, there are some things that people can receive, and then there are things that it doesn't matter what you say. That person is just not going to hear it, so they don't have ears to hear. So I think the Mark of 6 years ago probably would have been open to hearing some things about storytelling and photography and my travel and which bike to buy and things about suspensions and things like that. But the lessons about learning how to be in the moment and some tranquility and that kind of stuff, I think just takes a little bit of time and age.
Age, for sure. I've changed as I've gone through my 20s and through my 30s now. I'm a completely different person 10 years ago, you know? The experiences I've had.
20s are great because you have this, you know, this enthusiasm. You think you know everything and have all the energy to take on the world, and you can accomplish a lot.
Yeah.
And then your 30s rock around, and it's really great because you finally start to earn some money, and so you don't have to eat hot dogs every day. And I think when your 40s roll around, it's great because now you know who you are, and you don't have to really apologize. You can just like, this is who I am. And then your 50s roll around, and you're like, what is happening? So yeah.
You know, I not in any way what you've done at all, but through my 20s, I traveled for work quite a lot to places like India, all over Europe, and places like that, right? For, you know, several weeks at a time, you know, a couple of months at a time, here and there. And that had a huge impact on me, massive impact. I was very different come the end of that kind of period of life, because of experiencing those different cultures is just, you can't replace that with something else. You only get what you get from that by going to do something like that. And, you know, as I grew up through the company that I was working for, you know, I don't think I worked with any other English people, really. Very few in comparison. Everyone was European or Indian or from the US. And it made me what I am, right? And I would, as much as I dislike the last few years of working for that company in my early 30s, truly dislike. I wouldn't give it up for the world. I wouldn't change any of it, because it's made me who I am, and I wouldn't have got those experiences any other way.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think, to bring us back to sort of the photographers that are watching this, one of the things, especially for younger photographers, that I think is a disadvantage, is that the expectation for photographers is to constantly be posting on Instagram, updating stories, making videos, and creating content. Content is king. And so it's just sort of drilled into you. You've got to create content. And then a lot of like gap year kids and, the backpackers and stuff that I've experienced through my travels, they're not actually experiencing the place that they're in, because they're so consumed with creating content that they can't actually be present. And so, for example, you might have, a few people that go to the beach, and the entire time they're texting on their phone, they're trying to find the best angle, finding the sunset, trying to record something. And so the appearance of their life on Instagram looks fantastic. But the reality is they haven't experienced the place at all. All they've done is, find the part of the beach that doesn't have trash in it, wait for the sun to go down, and make a video so that it looks like they're cool. And so, for younger traveling photographers, I would suggest that if you are creating content, set aside time to create content, and the rest of the time, leave your stuff at home. Don't bring your cameras, don't bring all your stuff. Just go and meet people, have the food, experience a great conversation, meet a stranger, find somebody that, speaks a different language, try to have a conversation, and do it just for the experience of doing it. Don't do it so that you can have a great clip for your YouTube channel. It's a very, very different thing.
Absolutely. And
wise words.
We actually experienced that ourselves only about a week ago. In last week's episode, we went to London, and our agenda was to create a particular type of photograph. And so we went into town for the first time in the year, because that's how long the lockdown, the pandemic, and everything has been. And so we went into town, with the intent of shooting lots of video, because originally I think the plan was to create an episode entirely consisting of scenes that were filmed in town, and at the same time create these street photos. But what became clear very, very quickly was two things. First of all, it's very difficult to create photographs and create all the video content at the same time when it's only the two of us and we have to appear in the video at the same time. So that wasn't maybe planned too well. But the other thing was just simply, I think, once we got out of the train station and just being in town again for the first time in like a year, I think that in itself was actually quite overwhelming. And I think, we had a hard time creating enough footage to feel like 3 minutes.
I thought about this after last week's episode, and I thought, how much time did we spend doing what we were doing? And I kind of worked it out that we spent about 5% of our time there actually taking some photos, 5% of the time taking a bit of video of us doing what we were doing, and the rest of the time chatting and catching up and looking around and what's going on around us. And that's kind of who we are.
And it was the first time. We were out on a little trip, get together type of thing. Since the beginning of December. And so all of that became, and we knew we had to create some content, but actually all of the other stuff became so much more important in that moment that in the end we didn't really care anymore whether we had enough content or not.
No.
We just created an episode around what we ended up having in the end, which meant we ended up sitting in the park.
Yeah,
for the most part,
which was actually fun.
Sounded
atrocious, but it was fun.
That is fantastic. That your experience is my experience every time I make a video for Adorama or my own YouTube channel or whatever, any kind of tutorial. And I always try to explain. People ask, "Why did you do this?" And the answer is usually, I couldn't do that because I couldn't show it on the video, or I have to have a camera here and a camera here, and there's got to be a light here. So what you don't see is all the stuff behind, and it influences everything you do in that tutorial. And, it's when I'm trying to take photos for a video, mainly I'm trying to, present to the camera. That's my thought is, is the audio level correct? Are the batteries still charged? Is the camera recording? Is the light on? Do I have the right shadows? Is there too much echo? Is there a plain noise? All that kind of stuff. And I'm almost totally detached from what I'm saying I'm doing, which is having a photo session. And so a lot of times I'll talk to people like, I cannot wait to get into the studio and actually take photos. And I'm like, you do that all the time. Like, no, I don't. What I do is I pretend like I'm doing it for the camera, and I take some photos and stuff, but my head is not where it should be to do my best work because I'm making a video. I'm not necessarily making photos. They're two different things.
But I've wondered this a lot when I've been, watching your videos, and especially your travel videos. I'm like, how do you lock all your gear around? Or did you, were you really clever in downsizing everything so that you can fit on a motorbike?
I'll tell you my camera that I use. I'll just show you. This is the camera that I shoot most of my videos with. Is this guy right here? I don't know if that focuses. Yeah. So the Osmo Pocket.
Oh, right. So cool. Awesome.
All the travel videos are shot with either the Osmo Pocket or the Osmo Action that's on my helmet. So 90% of that footage is shot with the DJI Osmos. And then the camera I'm using right now is the Sony ZV-1, which is very, very small. So I have really, really small cameras. But for Adorama, I have to have all the video cameras, but I also have to have the still cameras and studio lighting stuff and meters and all that stuff. So my motorcycle is literally filled with hard drives, the computer, because I have to edit all that stuff on the road. So I've got a MacBook Pro in there. I've got external batteries. I've got the ZV-1. I've got the Osmo Pocket, the Osmo Action. So those three cameras. I've got little clamps and hooks and stuff to mount cameras in ceilings and on chairs and stuff because they can't bring full tripods. I have one tripod. I have one light stand. For the longest time, I had a Profoto B1 pack and head that I used. Now I have speed lights that I use. I've got a Canon R5 and a 24-105 lens, the new R system. So I've got that. I've got a Sennheiser mic. That's what I have right now. I've got a lavalier mic underneath my shirt. And then what else do I have? Cables and tripods and I've got little tiny bags full of connectors and all kinds of stuff. And then I have one small bag of clothes. So almost everything I have is just to make content. So my dream is to one day be able to travel and not have to produce anything. That would be fantastic, to be able to just go and experience it and not take a single photo. Wow, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, because that's always, I guess a lot of viewers would probably, think that it's like, how do you combine the traveling part and then everything else that goes around it? Because we know how long it takes and how hard it can be to put a video together, even if it's only 10 minutes long, but it could potentially take quite a long time to get all the content together and edit it and stuff like that. So how do you organize that on your travels?
Well, the travel is unscheduled. So the plan is no plan. So I have the freedom because I don't have, kids or family or anything like that. I don't have to be anywhere. The only constraints are the obligations that I've made with Adorama and other companies like Audio Socket and Creative Live and Mac Group and those organizations. And so what I'll do is I try to make sure that I'm always in a major city or some place where I have friends where I can create content specifically for Adorama. So in Colombia, Medellin is sort of my second home. I've got a lot of photographer friends who live there, studios that, I can rent that are there. I've got a lot of friends who are models. And so it's really easy to go into Medellin and then set up for maybe a day or two and shoot. I can normally shoot 2 episodes in a day. More than that, my brain melts down because it's just difficult to get all the B-roll and set up shots and, saying all the lines right. And so usually that takes about 6 hours, something like that. So it takes about 3 to 4 hours to shoot a 10-minute video around there because you have to come in, set up everything. shoot the entire video and remember what the heck you're teaching. And then you also have to, while you're talking to a camera, spin around and then on the first go, shoot a photo that's print quality, which is almost impossible to do that. And so a lot of times, I'll set up the teaching and I'll separate the teaching from the photography specifically so I know I have photos that are high enough quality to actually show and say, yeah, this is right. And then I'll go into a hotel room or something and then edit like crazy. So there are sometimes that I'll edit for maybe 4 or 5 days, and that's it. That's all I'm doing is just editing. And that's also why the travel videos are so sporadic, because I'm paid to make videos for Adorama and other partners. And so if I have a week in a really amazing city and I spend that week just shooting 1 or 2 episodes and then editing those episodes and then trying to find Wi-Fi that's fast enough to upload it within 10 hours or something, that's 5 days. And so to make a travel video about that week, who wants to see me sitting in a hotel room for 5 days? Nobody. It's boring. And so there's no travel video for that. And then conversely, if I then leave that city and go to the jungle or do something that I think is pretty interesting, then I get to the next city, then I have another deadline that I need to create more videos for Adorama or whoever. So I don't have time to edit the travel stuff. I've got to keep making the stuff that's paying the bills. So it's always difficult to update markonabike.com or update the videos of travel, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully once I get back to the United States, I can set up a little studio and be able to optimize that time. I'll be able to update some of the stories from around the world, because there's some really interesting stories that I haven't told yet.
Yeah, I bet. I bet in 6 years of traveling, you must have come across a lot of really interesting stories to tell. Eh?
Yeah, I mean, it's that mostly for me, the interesting things are the people that I meet along the way. And, if I had the funds to do it, I'd keep traveling, and I don't think I'd make any videos about myself. I would just do interviews and talk about the ways that people live and how they make their living, and just different things about living in the world, different points of view, different philosophies, things like that. I find that fascinating. And so I'd love to make a series just about that. Not that there's not a million of them on Netflix, but I think that'd be the fun for me.
So you say, so where you are now, you kind of feels like your second home. I think you said a moment ago.
Well, Medellin. So I'm in Cartagena now.
Oh,
Cartagena is a party.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is it about that place that makes you feel at home? What draws you back there so often?
Well, I the first time I was in Medellin was in 2016, I believe. Yeah. I'd just come from Panama on a boat with my motorcycle. And fortunately for me, that crossing on this boat, I was with, I think, 10 or 15 other people. And so we were on this tiny sailboat for 7 days, I think 5 days. And everybody was fantastic. And by chance, we all ended up again in Medellin and decided to hang out. And so as we did that, we met a bunch of locals. And even though the people in the sailboat moved on and did other adventures and stuff, those people that were in Medellin, I've remained friends with them. And also because of YouTube and Facebook and all of that, normally when I go to any city, there are people there that know who I am. And so I'll try to meet with those people. And, half the time at least or more, I'll meet somebody that becomes a friend for life. So in Medellin, it just happens that a lot of those people are still there. The photography community is really strong. So it's not so much the city, it's just I've got a lot of friends there. And I was thinking the other day, I think I have more friends in Medellin now than I do in Phoenix, where I've lived for 30 years or something. So it's it feels like coming home. There's a hotel that I stay in. It's an old mansion that was converted into they're sort of like hotel rooms, but it's just this really amazing space that you can go hang out in your room. You come downstairs, there's this big open area. Everybody's hanging out. There's a full-time kitchen there and a chef. And you just sort of, and when I say chef, like it's a 5-star resort. No, this is somebody that can cook chicken and rice for you if you want that kind of a chef, a cook. Yeah, so it feels sort of like somebody there that can help you out. So it feels a lot more of a cohesive community in Medellin than in other places. But I've experienced that in a lot of cities. So I experienced that in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, a really strong community there. I stayed there for 6 or 7 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. So I made some great friends there. I wish I would have gone back this year. That was the plan, but I didn't. I found that in Madrid. So I stayed in Madrid for months. In Paris, I've got a really strong foundation there. In Buenos Aires, of course, I got stuck there for almost a year because of the pandemic. So I think it was there 9 months. Yeah. So I've got a really strong, I think of them as family in Buenos Aires. Same thing is true in Phoenix. Same thing is true in Seattle. Same thing is true in New York City. And then in London, Gavin and Sam live down near Gatwick. And so, I've got a community of people in the United Kingdom. So it's sort of fun to be traveling for so long, having these different places. Oh, and Frankfurt, same thing. Frankfurt, Germany, Moscow, Russia, Novosibirsk, Russia. The list is long of places that I could just roll in and I'd feel right at home.
Imagine it. Just imagine it.
Sounds good.
Absolutely incredible.
I'm selling everything.
I'm quite envious, I have to say.
How much can I sell my children for? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Well, now I know you guys, and so next time in London, we're going to hang out. So
for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
Where were when the whole kind of pandemic thing first hit? Where were you when that first started to kick off?
I was in Patagonia. And I have a video of this happening. Actually, it's I was a friend of mine, Eileen Martinez, who I'm traveling with right now. She's a solo traveler, and so she had traveled from the southern tip of South America all the way to the northern tip of North America, and so she was on this journey. She did that in 2019, and at that same time, I was traveling. I just left Madrid, Spain, and I was with two of my friends from Spain, and we were traveling through the Western United States. And so I'd known who Eileen was through her social media, and she knew who I was through my videos and stuff. And so there's sort of this network of people traveling around the world for long periods of time. We all talk to each other. So it's a small community. So we tried to connect the four of us when we were in the United States, but that we just missed each other because of logistics. And so after that trip, my plan was to go back to Medellin and live in Colombia for a year and write a book and then edit all the travel videos because my trip around the world had finished. And so I returned to South America on my motorcycle, and it was around January, I guess, of 2020. And Eileen said, "Hey, you're in Colombia. Why don't you just ride down here to Patagonia? Because, the last time I was in South America on my motorcycle, I was there in the wintertime. And so, June, July, August in South America is winter." And she said, "It's January. It's the perfect time to get all the way down to Ushuaia, the southernmost point of South America." And I thought, hey, I haven't done that. Why not? I can do that in a month. I can just zip down on my bike. It's, I don't know, a few thousand miles, something like that. Boom, let's do it. So I did. So I headed south. I met Eileen in Patagonia. And fortunately, there was a problem. So we did all the Chilean side of Patagonia, and we crossed over the Andes, and we were in Argentina and planning to go to Chaltén and Calafate and see all these glaciers and a bunch of things. And Eileen's motorcycle broke down. It died. And so she couldn't continue. And at that point, like when we crossed, I think from Chile into Patagonia, we just started seeing notices of, hey, if you've traveled in Asia, you have to let us know. There's this virus going around. So it was very, very new. It wasn't, it was just starting to percolate on the news. And so the original plan was for us to spend a couple of weeks going down the eastern side of the Andes Mountains and then me to go down to Ushuaia, which is the southern tip. But because Eileen's motorcycle broke down, I was a little bit tired. I thought, I'm just going to shoot straight down to Ushuaia. And I did. And then I started seeing more and more stories that, hey, this thing is spreading. Things are starting to shut down. So travel hadn't quite shut down then. And so I still didn't think it was going to be, I'm thinking swine flu and, the outbreaks that happened in West Africa with Ebola and some things. And so I'm thinking this is an isolated problem in a different part of the world. And so fortunately, I then turned north and went up to Buenos Aires because my niece had just moved there. So my niece and her husband, and so they're in their 30s. I'm like, I'm coming to go up and see them for a couple of days. Then I'll go back to Colombia. And of course, I got to Buenos Aires, all the borders shut down. And then I was in a really strict quarantine from the beginning of March all the way until November. So I was basically locked in a room that entire time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself is probably not too dissimilar from what we've experienced over here during that time, because March was when it really all locked down here.
Right.
And it was especially, I mean, we're now just coming out of lockdown number 3. But certainly, I mean, the first lockdown was probably the most intense one overall. Not only because everything was shut down. I mean, it was the same this time around, but also the fear factor was different in the first, in the first lockdown because it was new and nobody knew what the hell was going on, and and then out of sheer desperation, we started this podcast.
That's a good thing.
Kind of enjoyed it and carried on.
yeah, that's the thing. Yeah,
I mean, fantastic.
And so, I mean, it was not too dissimilar. We were allowed out for 45 minutes a day for exercise, was it?
Yeah,
that was the deal.
Yeah, it was proper prison rules, wasn't it, back then? Yeah,
prison yard. But
the difference between the quarantines in Europe and South America and North America and Brazil, it vastly different, and the numbers show vastly different results as well. But in Buenos Aires, the lockdowns were, you can't leave your room. Like, you can't go outside, you're in. And even here now, the difference, I went back to the United States for a couple of weeks in February to do some pre-production for the Creative Live stuff. And it was sort of surreal. Here, when you go outside at all, you have to have a mask at all times, of course. Anytime you want to go into any kind of a business, you can't go in every single day. You can only go in on certain days based on your identification numbers. And so it's like a third of the people on 1, 2, 3, and then there's 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9, and then it sort of repeats. If you do go, they take your temperature. Then you have to provide them with identification. So they write down who you are, where you've been, and where you're staying. And then you can go into the store and then come back out. So that way they can do contact tracing. You have to disinfect your shoes before you go in anywhere. So there's a little tray that you have to disinfect your hands. They spray you down. It's just normal. So I'm just used to this whole procedure of going anywhere. And then you go to the United States. None of that is in place at all. So depending on the state, there's a disclaimer. So depending on the state. And so I was a little bit surprised that, anytime you would go somewhere, you could just walk right in. There's no contact tracing that I saw. A lot of, variation on if people are wearing masks or not. And so it's a lot different. Of course, you could argue, freedom of choice versus authoritarianism and all of that kind of stuff. I'm aware of that, but it's a really interesting change going from Argentina, which is really, really strict, to Colombia, which is strict based on region. So some places really strict, some places not. And then the United States also very, very different based on city and state.
Well, I think our experience here has been that, it's we've had like really strict government like lockdowns at one point, and then we used an app for contact tracing, which
it worked well.
Or not. This is a typical UK thing where things may or may not work. You never really know. But
sure.
It's so attempts were made anyway, and but then we've always been. I think the drive has always been to open up again. That was always like the agenda. So there'd be a lockdown, and it'd be like, okay, we'll open up again, and then of course, it was realized very quickly that the opening up of society had happened too early, and then the numbers went through the roof again. Then we went into lockdown number 2, and then everybody was screaming that freedom of choice and all that kind of stuff, and then we opened up again, and then just before Christmas the numbers went crazy, and at that point I think the penny dropped, that we just. And to be honest, I mean, when we went into this lockdown number 3, none of us really thought it was going to take this long. I mean, I literally thought it was going to be like 3 weeks, I don't know. Yeah, this was 4 months ago.
I'm pretty sure I said when I started, this is going to last a minimum of 3 months.
You're the eternal pessimist. It's me going like,
realist, man, realist.
Well, that is true.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting when I talk to younger people. So I'm saying 35 or younger, around there. Their perception is nothing like this has ever happened in the history of the world ever before. This is unique to their experience. And I'm like, this kind of stuff has happened. And for every generation, people have had to face this type of crisis. And so for my parents, it was, when they were kids, World War II. So there wasn't a lockdown, but there was the war, around the entire world. In 1918, there was the pandemic. We had the plague. You have, either famine or pestilence or war or something that happens almost every generation. Fortunately for my generation, we had the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and we got away with almost scot-free. So we didn't have to deal with much of anything. And so I think that's maybe put some of us at a disadvantage of like, oh no, I'm entitled to my freedom. I'm entitled to, anything I want to do. And having this pressure of, okay, we're a society, we have to take care of each other is a new thing for some people. So, it's difficult. There is no easy answer to this kind of a situation. Somebody's always going to have something to pay, time or money or something. There's no solution that works for everybody, unfortunately.
What has it done to your to your mental health? Because I'm guessing you're traveling. You've probably got some at least of an outline of an idea as to what you want to do next, and then this pandemic starts and everything gets thrown out of the window, and you're locked in a room in Buenos Aires for months. How did you get yourself out of that place?
Well, in Buenos Aires, it was a little bit interesting. So my niece and her husband had just moved there. They live in a really interesting little part of town called San Telmo, which is close to the center of everything. So my niece's husband is a university professor, and so they were sort of in this really cool place. So when I first got into Buenos Aires and was locked down, I had to go to a hotel, and I couldn't leave that room for 30 days. I couldn't see anybody. I couldn't talk to anybody. All the food had to be delivered with a special, you call down, say what you want. They deliver on room service, knock on your door. You wait 10 seconds, open it up. There's a cart. You get the food, bring it in, put the cart out, close the door. So for a month, it was solitary confinement. So that was difficult, but that was early days. So that was Zoom meetings and all the stuff people were doing early on. I think Adorama, we were doing create no matter what. So there was stuff to work on. And then I was able to get an Airbnb apartment that was just about a kilometer from where my niece and her husband lived. But we couldn't see each other because it wasn't legal. And the lockdown there was serious business. So if you were caught walking on the streets, you could, by a minimum, you would get a fine, but a lot of people were put in jail. And so it was, pretty darn strict. You couldn't just zip outside. And so for about a month or two, it was just me in a room by myself. And then I survived on Uber Eats, so there were delivery and stuff, sort of. But there was a crazy thing that happened. And so I had a balcony on the 8th floor, and I was on one of the main, it's like one of the main streets in Buenos Aires. So it's Avenida Corrientes. So it's the obelisk is there. It's just this main thoroughfare. So I don't know what you guys would call it in London High Street. I don't know, something. But I could see out my window where all the stores were, but they're all shuttered. So everything's closed. Nothing is open. and I could see a Starbucks just right down below on the other side of the road. There was a Starbucks. And so after I think the first 2 months, they opened essential businesses, and that included places that sell food. And so I walked out on my balcony one day and I looked down, and Starbucks was open. And I just almost freaked out. Not because I'm a huge Starbucks fan, but it was like there was something open, like I could talk to somebody. And so, and also when you travel a lot, you just want the taste of home, and Starbucks, you know, a mocha or a coffee, whatever, it's nasty coffee, but it tastes like home. And so I remember I went in and there were 3 or 4 people there, and I talked to them a little bit, and they obviously knew that I was from out of town because almost all the tourists had left the city. And so every single day I would go down to Starbucks, not for the coffee, but just to have a conversation with somebody. And so there were only like 4 or 5 people that were approved to work in the Starbucks. And so they were teaching me Spanish. So every day I'd go in, they'd teach me a new word, and we'd hang out. And, you know, you can't, there's a time limit. So it was like this little treat of being able to go down and hang out with them. They became really good friends of mine. And so for probably 6 or 7 months, I would go every single day to have a conversation with these 4 or 5 people that worked in the Starbucks. And then eventually they lifted some of the restrictions, and we were all able to go outside to this, you know, an outdoor eating area. And we had a dinner together one night, which was really great, all spaced out. It was really fun. So it was like 5 or 6 people all spaced out over a big distance. And so that was a fantastic thing. And I think that is true, no matter if you're in the pandemic or not. Finding a community wherever you live is really important. And it doesn't matter if you're traveling or not traveling, or in a pandemic or not in a pandemic. For anybody that wants to survive through life, the most important thing, one of the most important things, is community. You know, having friends that will let you talk to them, listen to you, people that will tell you where you're wrong or when you're right, or encourage you or tell you to sit down, whatever it is. But you've got to be based in a community, and not a virtual community, a real life community. And I think that's also the difficulty of the pandemic, is that has been removed from us. And so, that's how I survived, was just friendships, making friends. And of course, my niece and her husband, finally, we were able to come and meet. And so I spent a ton of time zipping back and forth to their apartment. So just people saved me.
I think pre-pandemic, people forgot that that's what life is actually all about, right? I certainly did. You know, you just get so caught up with, you know, regular, you know, life and work, and I've got to get this done, got to, you know, all of that kind of stuff. You forget. I mean, certainly for me, and hopefully I can speak for many other people out there. Over the past year, I've come to realize more and more and more how important the people are that are around me. Whether that's someone like Kay, whether that's someone I just happen to have this 5-second conversation with down the street, or in a Starbucks, for example. They're the moments that actually matter to me. And I'm hoping that this past year, people will remember that that's what it's all about, and come out of the back of this with a slightly different perspective on priorities, I guess, and what's actually important to you. That's my hope. Yeah. That's me trying to be positive. I don't do that very often, but on occasion.
But the weird thing about this is, I thought about this the other day, and I kind of thought, you know, over the last year, I personally, and I think it's probably the same for you, but, you know, we've connected with more people, with more creative people than we would have done ordinarily, you know, had the pandemic not happened, and had we just kind of continued to be stuck in the rat race, you know, and going around the hamster wheel. Yeah. You know, I think go
ahead.
Yeah, no, that's you know, the point is, it's actually, for us, in a way, it's actually led to making more connections rather than less, which is what you would assume would happen, you know.
Absolutely. You know, way back in the day, in the Snap Factory days. So Snap Factory was the name of my studio in Phoenix, Arizona. And I taught an 8-week workshop every Tuesday night and every Thursday night from 2003 to 2014 with no breaks. So I never missed. So I think I took 1 week off somewhere. But the joy of that was you would have 12 people for 8 weeks. So they'd come in every Tuesday night, and it became, it's like going to camp. At first, everybody didn't know who anybody else was. Nobody knew anybody's name. And then over the weeks, by sharing their photos and growing together and doing these exercises and going on group photo shoots and all that kind of stuff, those people really became a cohesive little group of people. And invariably, what happened is those people became longtime friends. And that just happened over and over and over. And so the joke was in Phoenix, you came to Snap Factory and you left part of the Snap family. And it's true. So there are probably, I don't know, 600 or 700 people in Phoenix that have been through all of those workshops that still hang out to this day. They'll go and, of course, little cliques and stuff. And that was, to me, the driving force of teaching those workshops, because, anybody can learn about photography on YouTube or some way. But for me, it was the in-person community and just getting together. And so I still have one of my best friends. We met in the class. His wife bought the class for him in 2004, I think. And he's my best friend to this day. Another guy, Keith. I mean, there's just tons and tons of people. I have a crazy story about London and mental health. If we have time, I can tell you this story. So way back in 2017, I think, I was in Africa, and the opposite of community is just being totally isolated. And so I was going through that, because normally in parts of the world, you can connect with people through broken English or, some Spanish or something. But in Africa, the places I went, nobody spoke any language that I had any remote connection with. So they'd speak Kosha or Afrikaans or something. And so it's like, stuff like that. So there's no conversation happening at all. And even in the best of circumstances, when you're in a country you don't speak the same language, the conversation is at best like, is the food good? Yeah, the food is good. Would you like more? Yes, that's good. Where are you from? I'm from here. Good. Okay, thanks. There's not much, and you're not discussing Kierkegaard or something, existentialism or something deeper. You're just having a basic conversation. But even less than that was happening in Africa. And then on top of that, I was taking these malaria pills that the side effects are depression, suicidal thoughts, hallucination, mood swings, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, none of that will happen to me. And that, almost all of that stuff happened to me. And so as I was riding through the countries, I finally got up into Kenya, and I'm like, I have to get out of here for my own mental health. I'm going crazy with just being totally isolated. I'm really not in a good headspace. And so I thought, I'm going to go to London and hang out with Gavin Hoey. And so I flew my bike to London, and I'm like, Gavin, I'm in town. He's like, great. And I was going to go see him. I was in Greenwich, and my motorcycle was stolen. So the bike, very expensive bike that I love, is like my one possession, gone. And then I learned London is like the number one place in the world for bike theft, which I didn't know that. So anyway, so I went down to Gavin's house. He's like, I've got a spare bedroom. You can just stay in my house. And so luckily my motorcycle was found, but it had been thrown off the back of a truck and destroyed. And so they said, it's going to take about 5 weeks to rebuild your motorcycle. So I was stuck in London. And fortunately, Gavin let me stay at his house for a good portion of that time, or else I would be broke because London is so expensive. But, and Gavin had no idea. Gavin and Sam, his wife, is really awesome. Sam, you have to meet her. You have to have both of them on your podcast. But they had no idea that I was like in this, like recovering from all these malaria pills, and that was working its way out of my system, and all the mood swings and depression and stuff. But what they did was every night they're like, come on inside. We're going to have, they'd make homemade pizza or whatever the food was. Sam would make something, really yummy. And then we would watch Taskmaster, which is now one of my favorite shows ever. So we'd turn on Dave and we'd watch Taskmaster for like a month. And we just binged Taskmaster. Yeah. And that was sort of how I recovered from that time in Africa. It was just hanging out with Gavin and Sam and their daughter, and watching Taskmaster and just being silly. And for those who watch Adorama TV, Gavin and I have done some pointless challenges where we have a task, we open it up, and we have to go and do that thing. Those are 100% based on watching Taskmaster.
Right.
So that's where those came from. But yeah, community, it's key. It's essential.
I can absolutely see how that would have an effect. Because I remember, when again you're coming back to the first lockdown last year, like March, April, over here in the UK. You obviously it's generally a worrying time because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen to your job. The reason why we started the podcast in the first place, as all of our tens of viewers out there will know, is that we had things lined up and everything got canceled, and literally from one day to the next, it was all gone. And so we just decided we had to do something or start something to keep ourselves sane, because we got to the point where you'd wake up in the morning and you'd be like, I don't even know what day it is today. Right. 3 weeks later, you wake up and you go, I don't know what day it is, and I don't care. Because every day is the same. And so that's why we started the podcast, to give us some structure, so that we decide, like, all right, every Monday we will record a show, every Thursday we release it, and so at least we know what to do on a Monday and what to do on a Thursday, and so that literally structured. But the other thing that worries you, of course, if you have kids, is what happens to your kids, because your kids are not seeing their friends, and their social umwelt basically has been blown to smithereens. They can't really communicate with, they're not going to school, and you're really generally, worried about, what is going to happen to them, especially because you don't know, or nobody knew at the time, how long this was going to last. Was this just going to be a few weeks? Was it going to be a month? Was it going to be 3 months? Or was it going to be worse, like 6 months? Because nobody knew. And so what we did, we did these kind of movie marathons, the Marvel movie marathon, like 26 movies or whatever it was, and it was fun because it turned into like a family occasion, and we'd watch them in order from, I don't even know, Iron Man 1 or whatever the first one. No, it was Captain America. That's the first one I said. That was like the first one. And then we just, we watched the whole thing through. And it was funny how everybody got involved, and the conversations then started to evolve around the characters and what was going to happen in the context of the story, of the overall story arc across all these movies and stuff like that. And that took a little bit of the sting out of the whole situation. It just, it lightened things up a little bit. It was a distraction. And it worked for 26 movies. It was great.
That's fantastic. My sister and her daughter are doing that same thing right now. They're doing all the Marvel movies.
Right, great.
Like, oof, that's a lot of Marvel movies.
It's crazy also because, of course, Marvel has since then started producing lots of TV shows on top of that. So you get even more content to watch.
So you're going to have to start that whole process again. Yeah? All 26 films plus
TV well, we are, we're keeping up with it because I'm lucky enough that I've married a woman who's a major sci-fi fan.
Okay.
A nerd, if you will.
Let me ask you this. There's only one right answer to this, but you can guess. What's the best sci-fi film ever made?
Well, in my view, it would be Star Wars, what they now call A New Hope. But there you go.
Okay. I can see that.
That's
I think historically, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a story behind it. It's actually, it would actually be Return of the Jedi in a sense, because that was the first sci-fi movie I ever saw in the movie theater. And you see,
my first was Star Wars as a child. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I remember standing in line to go see Star Wars.
You see, I was a kid, and basically it was the first time that back in those days, my parents didn't care. Like, my mom gave me some money. Seriously, my mom gave me some money. I had to get on a train. And it was like a 20-minute train ride or something to the next bigger town. I grew up in the south of Germany in a wine region where it's basically out on the prairie, out in the vineyards, right? And so I had to take a train to get to the next town where there was a cinema. And so my mom gave me some money. I hopped on a train and I went to the cinema, and I saw this. They had these these posters outside, and I look at the poster, and there's like spaceships and weird aliens and lightsabers. And I'm
Yes,
like, right,
gotta go.
I'm gonna go see that. And so I looked tall for my age, and so they let me in. This old lady, you know, did I get ticket?
You conned her.
Yeah, well, pretty much, yeah. So anyway, so you know, I went in, and what I used to do back then was I used to sit right in the middle in the first front row in the cinema. And so I'd get like the
worst.
full on, surround, like 3D experience, right? And so, and I didn't know what to expect because I'd never heard of Star Wars at that time. And
this was before George Lucas messed with it.
Yeah. And this was Return of the Jedi. So the funny thing was I basically,
effects,
you know, I
it should
watched
be
the
done.
thing. I was steamrolled. I was like, the movie finished, and I had no idea what just happened. It would just, it completely, my senses were blown. And so what would happen would be everybody would leave the auditorium through a single door. So it's different. You came in through a different entrance, and the exit was just a
Right.
single door. And there was like a thick black curtain that was about maybe half a foot away from the wall, and everybody went outside. And I was the last person in the queue, and so everybody went through this door, and I just slipped in that space in between the curtain and the wall, and they shut the door, and I was straight back to the front row. Because I knew that in about 20 minutes' time, they would show the movie again.
Right.
And I did that 3 times.
Wow. Wow.
And so,
you're a bigger geek than I
oh
thought
man,
you
and I
were.
tell you what, you know,
Well, I'll blow your mind with a fact, a
Right.
Mark Wallace fact. So, Return of the Jedi, you know, all the land speeder stuff, or not the land speeder, the stuff they're in the Redwood Forest.
yes,
Zipping through.
yeah.
I lived there for 5 years. And
Did you?
Oh.
Wow, awesome.
So, yeah, one of my friends was in Return of the Jedi. He was one of the guys standing outside the door, you know, trying to get in the forest. So yeah, and when I first moved there, it was in 1983. It's Crescent City, California. You could still walk up into the forest and find, you know, little remnants of Return of the Jedi out and about. You can sort of find like a little scrap of costume, whatever. Yeah.
See, and this,
Back
you know,
in the
this is the
day.
thing. This is the thing that brings us together because where we are right now, we are literally only a few miles,
10 minutes.
yeah, from the movie studios where all
Pinewood.
Pinewood Studios, where all the contemporary Star Wars movies are filmed, is literally just down the road.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and you
I
see,
did not know that.
and you see the productions. In fact, when they shot, what was it? Where they brought in all the sand. Do you remember?
Oh,
Was it The Force Awakens?
Force Awakens, wasn't it?
Yeah. So when they shot The Force Awakens, this is hilarious. They shot the opening scene was like on some desert planet or something, and
Right.
where, you know, this village gets attacked by stormtroopers, and so they shot that in the Pinewood car park, like in the parking lot, and they brought in
Wow.
trucks and trucks and trucks of like beach sand, and literally dumped it all in the parking lot and created this
Amazing.
this desert
That is
set.
crazy.
And I remember them queuing.
Wow.
Is that not the same one where
Yeah.
they actually built the Millennium Falcon?
Yes, that's
Like
right.
life size or near life size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Star Wars going on around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots. I'd say Blade Runner.
Blade Runner.
Oh,
Okay,
right,
cool.
yeah.
The original.
I can get on
Yeah.
board with that for sure.
Yeah. Did you like the more recent version?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it wasn't
22, whatever it was.
I mean, it wasn't a classic like the original, but I
No.
thought it was a decent sequel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great story for sure.
Yeah. It's good. One of my favorite German films. I don't know what the German Run Lola Run. Have you seen it?
Oh God, that's a killer movie, man.
It's
Yes.
so good. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's so I saw this movie over here in the UK because I moved over to the UK like in the mid 90s. And I saw that in a Blockbusters, believe it or not, when they still existed.
Yeah.
You know? And I picked it up and I realized, you know, it was Run Lola Run, but the German title was, I think it was
Lola Rent, right?
something like that. Yeah, exactly. And so I saw a
Yeah.
German title on the DVD box. I'm thinking, a German movie in a Blockbusters here?
Oh, it's so good.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you
actually-
seen it?
No,
Adorama
I'm not
TV
sure. I have.
video based on Blade Runner and Run Lola Run. I made a video for Adorama based on those two movies. Like this photo shoot is based on these two movies. It's out there somewhere. I did it probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago.
Right. Okay.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
we're gonna dig that out.
Dig that out. What did you do in it? What connected them?
I made a movie poster. I think that's what it was.
Right.
So we shot some stuff with lights coming in the lens and smoked up the studio and then threw it all in. I don't know. But definitely it's a shout out to those specific movies.
Ooh, I feel a remake challenge coming on.
Movie poster could be fun.
I'll find it and see if I can send it to you.
If I shoot you as Mark Hamill,
ooh,
you'd love that.
Yeah. There's a cool bakery nearby mine. I could do.
You can get some Chelsea buns inside of you.
Yeah.
A
couple of Danish
These
ones.
are not the lights you're looking for. Yeah, sure.
Nice. Yeah, but that can be done.
Dear.
Yeah, the little remake thing.
Oh,
For
I'll be
sure.
Jabba the Hutt. You can be my slave girl. Yeah.
Oh my god, I feel like Jabba the Hutt right now.
Oh man, I started working out again today for the first time in a month.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's starting to
Doing
hurt
that,
already. Oh.
yeah. Yeah, I did gain about 15 kilograms during the pandemic. So, it's not good.
Did you have to change out the suspension on your bike?
I had to change my bike jacket.
Oh
Yeah.
really?
I can't fit in this anymore. You laugh like Jimmy Carr. What's going on?
I can't believe you just said that.
Awesome.
Not 2 days ago, I put up a story on. Well, no. So I take one step back.
Yeah.
A friend of mine started saying, "You laugh like Jimmy Carr," like a year ago.
Yeah.
The first time ever. No one's ever said that to me before. And then we were doing a shoot recently as we started to be able to get back outside and whatnot. And out of nowhere, he said, "Nick, you laugh like Jimmy Carr." And not 2 days ago, I put up just a story because I took a photo of him just after he'd said that, of him laughing, and just put a post up about that. And I can't believe you just said that.
Yeah. It's a pretty distinct laugh. I can't even do it.
Like inhaling.
Yeah, the inhale laugh.
Brilliant.
That's crazy.
So perfect.
So when you're you're going back to the United States in a few weeks' time, you said, and you can spend the next year there. When you first decided to sell up and leave, like what was that? What was the initial kind of what's the word? What was the initial
inspiration?
The inspiration for it, yeah.
Well, there was no like all of a sudden, bam! I've decided I'm going to leave. So the truth is, I've been a traveler for much longer than I've been a photographer. I've always traveled. It's just that people don't know me for that part of my life. And so, starting in maybe 1985, when I got my first car, I would drive up and down California. And then when I got out of high school, it was trips across the United States. Then I created a production company, where we traveled. I was in a band. It's a long history of Mark Wallace before YouTube. But I was traveling in the 90s, about 40 to 44 weeks full time every year for years. So about 13 years, I was just always on the road. So I've been to every nook and cranny and small town and every highway and byway in the United States to death. So another friend of mine traveled with me during that time. We traveled together, and we were sort of proud that we could drive basically from California to Florida without a map and navigate through all the cities along the way. So, traveling has always been in my blood. And so I stopped traveling in around 2000. So I got a job at Intel. So I was a software developer at Intel. Then I became a manager there for about a decade. And so fortunately, that helped me start a studio and gave me funding to create the photography business. But, that was a shocker to me, because now I had to be in a desk, 9 to 5, 8 to 5. Well, at Intel, it was 7 to 8, whatever. It was long days. And I think that the only saving grace is I became the manager of the integration engineering teams in India. And so I was flying back and forth to India. And then, I'd stop over in France along the way, and I managed a team up in Oregon. So I was zipping back and forth. So I had at least some travel during the last few days or few years that I worked there. And so when I left Intel in 2009, I resumed traveling. So I was traveling back and forth to New York and zipping around the United States, but also doing the photography stuff. I just didn't post all of that travel stuff. And so really what happened is in 2012, I wanted to do a tour of the United States. I'd done a tour in 2009 with Pocket Wizard. We did the Mark Wallace US Meetup Tour. I zipped all over the United States and showed people how to use the Mini and Flex Pocket Wizard system. It was just a fun tour. I wanted to sort of recreate that and do a workshop tour through the United States. And it was a disaster. So that tour, because we had a really large partner that was going to do all the marketing and booking studios and a lot of stuff. So they had a big investment. And right at the last minute, they pulled out. And so all the marketing vanished. And it was after I'd already reserved, these were places that we reserved expecting audiences between 300 and 600 people. We thought it was going to be what we did in 2009. And so what happened was I did about half of that tour and it lost just tens of thousands of dollars. It lost so much money. And so, it was so much money that it cost one of my employees their job because we couldn't pay the salary. So that was sort of devastating that had happened because it was, not just a worker. It was, we considered ourselves family. So I really wanted to travel, but we recovered from that financial loss as a company. I wanted to do the travel, but I never wanted to put another person at risk financially. The people that worked with me have families and kids and house payments and all of that kind of stuff. And the truth is around 2013, 2014 was on paper, probably the peak of my online career. So I was partnered with Profoto and the Mac Group and Adorama TV and X-Rite and many brands. And so I was just online, either live or making videos every single day. Sometimes we'd make 2 videos in a single day. We had six people, working full time, 2 editors full time, and producer and myself and a lighting tech and a camera operator and makeup artist and assistants. And, it was an incredible amount of work, an incredible amount of cash flow coming through. And what I found was I had no time for myself. And so all of that stuff sort of combined where I thought, is this really what I want to do with my life, for the next 10, 15 years?
Guess his internet's gone. Oh, a power cut. That could be even worse. Or maybe the light's just gone off. Hey!
Hello?
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
You're back.
Yeah. So I have a Sony ZV-1 and Sony's have this massive design flaw, which is you can plug them into external power, but they still use the internal battery. And when it dies, it just shuts it all down, even though it's on external power. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
That's a winner of a design cameras. Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So normally in the studio, you make a video, you turn off the camera and it charges up and then so sorry.
That's
now
right.
I'm on my AirPods. I hope this isn't horrible.
That's all right.
But now I can actually look at you guys instead of looking way up here. So I'm sorry, podcast viewers. I have ruined the podcast. I wanted to travel. I didn't want to put other employees at financial risk. I didn't want to continue doing 2 or 3 videos every single day, webinars constantly. I was just exhausted from all of that. And I felt like I have this online persona of Mark Wallace. And even my friends, when I'd show up, they're like, hey, Mark Wallace is here. Like people that have known me for, 20 years, because it's Mark Wallace is sort of this person that people see online. And I thought, gosh, I haven't carved out any space for myself. And so I decided one day through talking with many friends and a few months of looking at things that it was now or never really. And so that's when I did that. So there's a much more in-depth version of that story, but I think it would take us more time than we have to discuss that. That's in a nutshell how that happened.
So travel's been, permanently there for you, right? The want, the desire to see other places, experience other regions and whatnot, right? That's inbuilt in you. It's genetics, isn't it?
I think, when I was a little kid, I lived in a town called Hamilton, Montana. So Montana is in the very north of the United States. It's in the mountains. It's very rural. This is in the 1970s. And so there were really no large stores in the tiny town I lived in. It was like maybe 2,500, 3,000 people in a very rural place. We got milk from the cow down the road, and we grew our own vegetables. My dad hunted, and he brought the meat home. Our house was heated with wood. So we're talking very rural kind of upbringing. But there was a big city called Missoula that was just north of us. It was, in my mind, this grand adventure to go to Missoula. Now, when I go back, to visit, it's a 25-minute drive. It's not that far away. But I can remember my dad taking me to Kmart. I don't know if you know what Kmart is, but Kmart is like Walmart or I don't know, some big store, but way back in the 70s. And I'd never experienced a store that was more than a tiny mom and pop shop. And so I remember going to Kmart with my dad, and I think my brother and my mom were there as well. But we drove, through the mountains, in my mind, this grand adventure is maybe half an hour. And then we got to Kmart, and in Kmart, there were rows of toys and clothes and bicycles and skateboards. And then the big deal was they had a cafeteria. I'm going to have to send you an image of what a cafeteria looked like in 1970 at Kmart, because it's amazing. It's like everything's plastic and brown and orange and globes and spaces. But I remember going to that, and you'd have a little tray and you'd get whatever. And I just remember we were eating at a restaurant, and that whole day I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It's just so amazing. It was just this really surreal experience. And I was telling a friend that story in Paris a couple of years ago. And they're like, oh, that must seem so crazy to you now that, you just went to a Kmart compared to what you've experienced, coming to a city like Paris or going to Kathmandu or something. And I'm like, no, the experiences are equal to me. That childhood experience of going to Kmart is just as fascinating to me as walking down the streets of Istanbul or going to Mongolia or something. It's an equal experience of wonder and awe. And I think the takeaway from that is really important, that you not compare your own life experience with the life of somebody else, because whatever you're experiencing. And if going to, Starbucks for the first time is a mind-blowing experience to you, nobody can take that away. It is a mind-blowing experience. And it's no less mind-blowing than walking to the jungle somewhere, flying across the world. If that's something that's new and adventurous to you, then it is. It's totally valid. And so the advice I'd give for people that, want to have new experiences in life is you don't have to go across the world. You don't have to do some big grand journey. Just try something new, whatever that is. Go to a dance class or hang out with a new group of photographers, or try a new style of movie, or go to a new cafe across town, or take a new sport up, something. And you might find that is the equivalent of having a Kmart mind-blowing experience. So it's all valid. It's all good. It's all the Umwelt experience of, if it's new, it's new.
God, yeah. Absolutely. This podcast has been filled, absolutely filled with wise words. I hope people take a lot of this away. What you're just saying there, it's like you don't know you're good at something until you try it. And you have to be open enough to go and try anything. Doesn't really matter what it is.
Sure.
You may suddenly realize you are the most fantastic skater in the world, and you never knew it because you never tried it for whatever reason.
Yeah, the other thing is that you get to try things in order to find the good in it.
Yeah.
The best example for that most recently is, and we'll talk about this again, is an app called Clubhouse, which I only very recently joined. Interesting thing. So he's
a dating app, or
I know. Had to get in there.
The amount you're on it.
But here's the interesting thing. somebody invited me to this app. I hadn't really woken up to that part of social media until very recently. And initially I kind of thought, well, this is just going to be another social media app, I put it in the same bin as like TikTok or whatever else, something else that would essentially occupy part of my time. And, I would probably think it would be fun for a couple of weeks. And then, it would go straight back into the bin of, has been social media apps. And one of the things I found really fascinating about it is that unlike with just about any other social media app where you leave posts or you post pictures or videos or whatever, or, written word, this is a thing where you're in a room and you're talking to other humans in real time. Like you're having actual conversations. And the thing, at first I thought like an app based on audio, that's never going to work. Little did I know that in the meantime, it would become massively successful. But the thing that really draws me to it is it's just simply the fact that you talk to other humans, other people who have similar interests in real time. And in the 3 weeks or something that I've been trying it out, I've had so many really awesome conversations with really interesting people from all over the world. And the one thing that connects all of these people that I've been speaking to, that I've had the opportunity to have conversations with, is just the interest or love for photography, or creativity and something like that. And it's been really quite interesting. I'm surprised, but it's this thing where, I went to it thinking, I'm going to give it a shot, and then I'm probably never going to open that app ever again. And it's just, I've been proven wrong.
Fantastic.
It's been
yeah. Going back to what you said earlier about you'd never know if you're good at something unless you try it. Something that my sister and I were just talking about recently is that it's fantastic to do things you're not good at just for the sake of doing them. And I think that's another cultural thing. Is like, if you want to play guitar and you learn that you're not very good at it, well, then you shouldn't be playing guitar. But if you enjoy playing the guitar, it doesn't matter if you're good at
exactly,
it.
yeah.
Do it. Yeah. I think it's true also of photography. If you enjoy it and you don't have aspirations of becoming a professional photographer or published photographer or do fine art, you just like taking photos, fantastic. Good. Do it. Yeah. You don't have to be good. Just enjoy it.
No. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Couldn't
agree more.
I spent the best part of 25 years teaching the guitar. And the beautiful thing about that is that music in general, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the guitar, it could be any instrument, and therefore really any creative endeavor, no matter whether it's painting or music or photography or whatever, it is that you can get at it from so many different angles, and it means something different to every single person. And, some people have the ambition and the drive that they want to turn into their career, and, and they work really hard and spend every breathing minute of the day working on their, technique or whatever. And that's cool. But then other people just simply enjoy strumming a bunch of chords, and their goal may be to learn 3 Beatles tunes, and that's cool. If they love
you learn one, you'll know them all.
Yeah. And the reality is, I've been playing the guitar since I was 7, but the reality is, most of the time when I pick up the guitar at home nowadays, I write goofy songs for my 9-year-old daughter.
That's awesome. All right, I got a question. If you had a choice, any Martin that you wanted, any Taylor that you wanted, or any Fender that you wanted, which would you choose?
So, except for the Martin, I have Taylors and Fenders.
Did you hear that? Plural?
Plural,
yeah.
Much to my wife.
Means you have too many.
I have too many, yeah, for sure. No, but here's the thing. So I'm in love with 2 guitars, and you've mentioned 2 of those actually. I own a 1984 Fender Stratocaster American Standard, which my dad bought.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's
green?
Awesome. Say it again.
Is it green?
No, it's black.
Black. Okay.
Black. Yeah, it's a rosewood fretboard. But my dad bought it he actually bought it in 1985, I think. And and so I grew up with that guitar. I eventually inherited it. And despite all the other guitars that I bought over the years, this is the one guitar that I play virtually every day. You know, nothing compares to the sound of it. There's also a lot of kind of memory in it and everything else. It just feels like it feels like my hand has grown around it. You know, which is the weird thing. So it just feels like the most comfortable guitar. So I love playing that thing. And the other one is actually a Taylor 314 Grand Auditorium shape, which I bought. That was the first, relatively speaking, first really expensive steel string acoustic guitar that I bought, and I used that to write so much music on, and I used it to perform because I did. I started out as a session musician playing in bands, and then I was an electric guitarist for the most part, and then by sheer accident, really ended up I was like carving out a little live performance career as a solo acoustic guitarist, which seemed ridiculous at the time because I don't sing for love or money or for the benefit of mankind. I really don't sing. And so it seemed bizarre to me that people would want to listen to instrumental steel string acoustic guitar music that never made any sense to me. But for some reason, it turned out there were people who would even pay for that. So, and it was just like everything I did, I did on that guitar, and I even named my daughter after it.
That's awesome. So your dad bought you a Fender Strat.
No, it was his guitar. It was actually his guitar. He came home with that. It was when I went to college. So I moved to the UK to go to music college, and there was a point, as a music student, I wanted to be independent, and I was very poor. And there was a point where I had some really good gigs coming up, recordings, I think it was. And my guitar given up, and I had no money to buy a new guitar. I had no money to get it fixed.
Wow.
It was a disaster. And so my dad put that guitar on the truck and sent it over to London. And I was
Wow,
that's fantastic. My dad bought me a Fender Dreadnought acoustic steel string.
Nice.
When I was in high school. Yeah. Which is not a very good guitar. I'll tell you that. It's and now I've had it for so long, but now it needs a luthier. The neck is all warped and it's like, it's buzzy. You can barely play it, but it's the memories. It's just sort of the nostalgia of the guitar. It's really fun. I have another question for you guys. I know it's your podcast. You're supposed to answer the questions, but
you go. Go for it.
Is that a Bell & Howell 8mm behind you?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so when I was 9, 10, when I first started making movies, I did it on a Bell & Howell 8mm, just like that.
Oh, wow.
And I did, so me and my friend, his name was Kenny Classy. What a crazy name is that? Probably in 1982, around there, we had a bunch of Star Wars figures, and we'd take that old Bell & Howell, and if you push up on the shutter, it only does one click at a time. And we did full stop animation Star Wars battles
spectacular
in 8mm with that camera. And so anytime I see it, I'm like, good old days.
Tell me you've got access to that footage.
No, all that film is gone. I have no idea what happened to that stuff.
I
think it is my friend's camera. Maybe he has it somewhere, but I haven't spoken to him in 40 years.
What's really funny about this is, so when I was a kid, the first thing I ever really bought with any money that I had saved up was a video camera. It was an 8mm, like Video 8, it was called at the time.
Right, yeah.
Like videotapes. And so that was really my way into photography, was actually through video. And so I used to make little movies because I was obsessed with movies, and I was also obsessed with Star Wars. And so in a very similar vein, I had lots of Star Wars toys, spaceships like the Snow Speeder and stuff like that. And I would take these models and I would mod them. So I would like glue stuff on them, like Allen keys and edding pen lids, and reshape them and then respray them and turn them into slightly different look. Well, they still look like snow speeders, but it's just different,
Sure.
So, and I used to hang them up on like fishing wires. And I used to like have a globe and put some light into that. And then I figured, because I'd seen like a behind the scenes thing on how they made Star Wars, and so I figured I can make the spaceships look like they're zooming through space by moving the camera and stuff like that. So I was I was recreating these kind of special effects. It's hilarious.
Some practical effects. Man. You guys need to do that for your next shootout.
Oh yeah,
Star Wars themed 100%. Stuff.
You know, a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever it was, we talked about. You've got an old film camera as well.
Yeah,
we talked about trying to, working out how to use these old cameras, right? And because I could pick up.
The cameras are good. It's finding a place to develop the film or getting the chemicals and stuff. That's the problem.
Yeah. So the thought behind that was, so Nick's got this old film camera, and I was given an old Agfa. What was it? It's like one of those, what do you call them? One of those bevel cameras.
It's a viewfinder.
Oh, bellow.
Rangefinder.
Yeah, one of those bellow cameras. It's made in 1980. Sorry, it was made in 1937 or 38, and it was given to my grandmother when she graduated from her photographer. Like she trained to be a photographer and a lab assistant or a lab person back in the 30s, and so that was her graduation present. This particular camera, and it had been sort of in my family, And then a few years ago, my mom gave it to me as a heirloom birthday present. I think it was. And I looked at it and I immediately thought, man, I have no idea how to use this thing. Not the foggiest idea. And then Nick got hold of this camera we're talking about, and we thought, like, hey, how cool would it be if we made a little short film on us figuring out how to work these things, do a photo shoot, and just see if we can actually come up with anything that resembles a photograph, at least,
We don't know if that works.
Has a dial. I don't know if yours does, but the old ones, they had a dial and it just said for the apertures, like sunny, cloudy, dim. I mean, it didn't have like an aperture value. It just had, if it was shiny outside or overcast, you would just dial to the weather, not
this
to the
has values,
value.
I think.
Yeah. But you've got another one that had the shiny, sunny thing. Is it the Kodak?
Oh, that does ring a bell.
Like the old ones had like a little color on there, and so you would match the color of the sky to the little dot on the front.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a little Kodak Brownie as well here.
Okay.
And that's like that. Yeah. Bright sun, average, on sand, hazy sun, cloudy bright,
like
open shade.
How subjective is that? Like, is that a hazy sun or is that an average sun? Like, well, I don't know. Yeah.
Oh man. That was our mission. That was one of the things we had planned. Actually for March. Do you remember that was scheduled in for March?
It was. It was. Yeah, we're going to get a couple other people involved and whatnot.
Yeah, we found a few people who had lived through the heydays of film photography. And had experience in developing film and stuff like that. And so the idea was that we would basically learn not only how to use the cameras themselves, but also learn the whole process, how to develop film and how to print and all that. And really, the idea was basically, we wanted to, for ourselves, we wanted to answer the question whether two photographers who really have kind of grown up in the age of digital photography. For the most part, would we be able to actually create something with film?
You can. I mean, the challenge for you guys, here's my suggestion. If you do it, find some black and white rolls or roll your own, and then try to find some developing solution. You just need a timer and an enlarger. You can find an enlarger at some secondhand store for cheap these days. But the process is not difficult. You just stick it in the solution for so long, you time it, you bring it out, you do some stuff. See if you can do that. And then for extra added bonus, try the dodging and burning. That's where it gets into the advanced stuff. So in the 80s, I did all of the darkroom stuff, it's before digital, but it makes me laugh now that people say, back in the old days, they got it right in camera and they didn't do all this Photoshop stuff. And I'm like, clearly you've never been in a darkroom, because I did a ton of that. Ansel Adams used to make plates for his negatives to block sky and shadows and all kinds of stuff. And so there was massive amounts of what we would now call post-production to create those images that we see that are classic. And somewhere, if you Google it, there's an old James Dean markup of the retoucher who did that in the darkroom. I don't know. It's on f-stoppers or something, but
I remember seeing it.
you
Yeah.
can see like the original print and then all the markings on it that needed to be adjusted in post-production. And then there's a fantastic documentary film that I think changed my life as far as my photography is concerned, but it's James Noctway, and the name of the movie is War Photographer. So James Noctway is a photojournalist who has this credo. Basically, he says, I'm not going to go into these areas that are, war zones and social injustice. He did all this stuff unless there's a way to connect that with a way that people can help. But anyway, in this documentary, it shows him in the darkroom processing these war portraits, of social injustice and famine and all this stuff. And it's massive amounts of post-production. And so I used to show that clip in my classes saying, the old myth is that back in the film day, you shot it and whatever you got out of the camera, that's what you used. That's absolutely not true at all. It's the same amount. We have more flexibility now. It's a lot easier now, but yeah, they still did all that stuff.
It's an interesting thing. I think, I sometimes occasionally I do talks in front of camera clubs about concept photography, because that's how I got into photography. In the end, was through being on stage and then started to photograph the things that were going on stage, and then really falling in love with photography. But so one of the issues you have very often is that, especially when it comes to concept photography, I talk to an audience where a large part of the audience actually believes that you have to get it right in camera, because for whatever reason, there may be a little bit, I don't know, traditionalists. But the way I always try and explain it is that in concept photography, you're in a situation where really, you're flexing what technology gives you. You're really maxing out what your sensor can produce, and and what you can do in post-production. And so it's a little bit like, the relationship between your camera and your computer is very much like the relationship between an electric guitar and the guitar amplifier. If you take an electric guitar and you play it on its own, unamplified, it's not really going to give you very much. You can play music, but it's not going to be very loud. If you look at the amplifier on its own, it's dead. But you put the two together, you get some incredible music.
And my feedback to those guys that say you have to get it right in camera is you don't even get it right in camera. If you're shooting JPEG, you have to set up your settings. You have to say what the saturation is. You have to say what the contrast is. You have to say, all of those things. And so you're essentially doing post-production in the camera. And if you're not, then the camera is making all those choices for you. So no matter what, there is processing that's happening to an image. And either you get to decide what that processing is, or the camera's going to decide for you. And I'd rather make the choice because I'm the artist. I'm in control. The camera's stupid. So yeah, and even with the guitar analogy, if you play a guitar and you play down next to the bridge, it's going to sound all tinny. If you play up toward the frets, it's going to sound totally different than you sound, or if you mute or whatever. There's a million different ways to play that same guitar. Just that's what the art is. That's what the creativity is make it your own.
Yeah, exactly. That's why everybody sounds different. You get different picks, different pickup choices, different pickup positions, different playing positions. Yeah. There's a really cool thing, actually. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but John Ohm got Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top in to record on one of his tracks, right? And he said, so Billy Gibbons walks in, and John Ohm goes, I have a room packed with guitars. Pick any guitar you want and any amp you want. Whatever you want to use for the recording, it's yours. And so Billy Gibbons goes into the room and he tries out lots of guitars. And John Ohm went, I couldn't believe what I saw. No matter what guitar he picked up, he always sounded like Billy Gibbons.
Yeah.
Couldn't be more true. That,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the way.
Unreal.
Yeah. I think photographers are the only artists that pay more attention to our tools than we do to our art. It's like on Instagram, I'm always shocked at how many people take pictures of their cameras. Like, I don't care what camera you're using. Who cares? I just want to see what comes out of it. If it's an iPhone or a Sony or not, who cares? Like, what are you doing with that?
We think exactly the same. And hopefully you've noticed, we probably actually haven't talked about photography much.
Yeah, I did hear. Yeah, fantastic.
And who was it? You said this a couple of times when we spoke to Moose Peterson a few months ago now, wasn't it? And he said, you know what? I love that because we didn't mention the word f-stop once
in the whole podcast. That's true.
That's right. There's more interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And photography is rarely about f-stops. You know? Oh no, your screen died. No, I could see you fretting that the battery was dying for the last 5 minutes.
I was watching it go. I thought, is it going to hold out?
Is that on the Ninja?
I can see it on your face. But that's my experience shooting my own videos constantly, is you're thinking about the stuff. You're not thinking about your content, because like, I wish I had a cameraman. I wish I had a production crew.
Yeah.
Maybe again one day.
I mean, you literally have to control everything. You got to make sure all your batteries are charged all the time, like all of these little things. Yeah.
It's crazy because like a normal Adorama TV video, I'm monitoring the main camera, the B-roll camera. Usually there's another camera overhead or something. So I have to make sure all of those are going in sync. Then I have to remember to, what I'm supposed to be going through, whatever the principle of photography is, to try to get those lines right. And then at the same time, pay attention to what the model is doing and give that person direction, and then make an actual photo that fits what I'm saying, and then do it all seamlessly. And so one of the things that happens when I go to a studio, people are like, hey, can we just hang out and watch? I'm like, no, you can't. And they're like, why? I'm like, because I'm already so distracted by all the cameras and making sure the lights aren't off and everything, that just for me to try to remember that today we're going to be talking about depth of field or whatever it is. And it's so distracting thinking like what you were doing, thinking, I know the battery's going to die on that. We've got about 5 minutes. How can I wrap this up to make sure that I don't? That's what you're thinking. And what you're saying is, and so depth of field is, very, very simple. You've got these 3 things that control that. And in your brain, you're like, okay, so I've got 2 more minutes to go. And that, oh crap, do I have my B-roll camera? Is at the right angle? Oh no, I forgot to tell the model she has to stand over here. So she's blocked. So I've got to move over here. And then, okay, I've got another minute and 30 seconds and you're still. And so this, and the internal monologue is radically different than what's coming out. And then invariably, I'll say something and I'm like, okay, I'll just let it go. And then there's a comment. You said depth of focus instead of depth of field. You should get it right. I'm like, oh
God. People need more to worry about than
right.
Oh, that's definitely happened to us. It's been, just doing this podcast has been really has been a learning experience. It's really funny when you go back to like episode 1, and you sort of see how we did things. But for us, I mean, again, we've spoken about this many times on this podcast. We literally, I remember we got on the phone on a Friday, and we decided we were going to start a podcast, and then you come up with a million different questions, like how do you do a podcast? Like, where do podcasts even live? Like, how does that even work? Right.
Sure.
And then and within 10 minutes, we'd basically uncovered about 100 different questions or something. And then at some point, we just went, you know what? It's Friday today. We're going to record our first episode on Monday, 4:00. That is it. And so we're just going to get started with it. And so we'd learned. We just figured it out. Yeah, we've just figured it out.
Yeah,
as we went along.
That's how you figure it out. You fail. Failing is learning.
Exactly.
And so if you haven't failed recently, then you're not growing.
Yeah.
So you should always be getting right to that place where you're about to, fail at whatever you're doing, and then you're okay. You're learning and continue to learn. That's also how like, I didn't know the Sony's battery didn't work when it was like that's how you learn, because it goes out on you, or the capacity of that card or whatever it is. You figure it out when it doesn't work.
Now we know that the Ninja can run for about an hour and 40 minutes.
Well, no, that's not what we know. Really? What we know is that the batteries that I'm using on those at the minute are knackered.
Right. Okay.
That's what we know, and they're not charging properly either.
This is Sony batteries.
So that's an Adamus.
Yeah.
Adamus has an AC adapter. It can run
It
forever.
It does, but I'm out of plug sockets where I am right.
Right. So we have learned that.
So here's funny. So the decision was, the thing that's the most important is the recording. But you thought, I'd rather have a light in the background on that's plugged in than the thing that's the most important.
Exactly it. Priorities, man.
Yeah, I have the Atomos. It's not the Ninja. It has everything yours does. It just doesn't record.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And so
The
I had
version.
a Sony A7 III, which is fantastic for video, except you can't see yourself. So you have to have an external monitor. And so once you add, it's like, Sony is so close to making great cameras, but they all have some massive fatal flaw.
Yeah.
And the question is, why do I keep buying them? I don't know.
But, I mean,
they can see in the dark. That's why they can see in the dark.
Yeah, I mean that's true for just about any camera manufacturer at the moment. You know, there's always something you go, why aren't they doing this? Like Nikon and the flip screens. Like, what's the why?
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be that difficult. Everybody else is doing it.
Yours frustrates the hell out of me. They thought, okay, I'll put a tilt screen on it. Okay, we'll do it halfway.
Totally pointless.
Do it halfway.
Yeah.
And then take the extra step and just do what
the only thing that's very cool about it is every time I shoot video, like when I shoot you, for example, on that DZ-M50, and it's this swivel screen or whatever, I always feel like I'm looking into like an old school, like medium format camera.
Down straight down.
Yeah. It makes me feel good.
Yeah, the Sonys, it's always like you can have 4K, but if you turn on 4K and you have an external monitor to see yourself, then face recognition is turned off. Like, okay, so you can't do the face focus with an external monitor plugged into HDMI. So you can frame it up, then unplug the monitor, and then you're in focus. So you can either see yourself in the frame or you can make sure you're in focus. Or like I was editing with an old laptop, and the A7 III can create proxy files at the same time as it records 4K. I'm like, fantastic. But if it does that, then you can't plug in the HDMI output to see yourself. Or you can have the proxy file, but you can't have the face focus. And so it's like, okay, you can have one of these three awesome features, but you can't have all three at the same time. Like, okay, add another processor and increase the price by $200.
Yeah.
Like, make the camera functional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason I bought the Ninja is because I've just recently transitioned to Canon. And so I've got a C70 as my video camera because I primarily do video.
Wow.
And I've got an R6 as a stills camera primarily, but as my secondary video camera. But downsides with the R6 and video, even though the video is fantastic on it, it's excellent, it's still got the 29-minute record limit and you have to start again.
Really?
But then it's got the old, same as the R5, the overheat issue in 4K and whatnot. So I got that to be able to do long form 4K filming.
Sure.
Simple as that. And that's the only reason I ended up. But I love it. It's what a fantastic piece of kit that Ninja is.
Yeah.
It takes a minute.
And I love the color, so you can see where your exposure is.
Yeah.
So the exposure levels with the color, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it. I just I don't want to have to carry a camera and an external thing, then an external microphone, then an external LED panel, and then it's like this tree of wow.
Yeah.
It's craziness.
Yeah, definitely.
And then a gimbal. Yeah. All of that on a gimbal.
No, they use this. You just
I love that.
Yeah.
This, I mean, if you haven't gotten one of these, it's $350 US dollars, $500 if you get the creator pack. It's by far the best camera I've seen in the last 15 years.
It's stunning. I've seen the visuals it produces. If that's what you've been using for it, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I got the first Osmo Pocket in 2 years ago when it first came out. Basically because it was so cheap, I knew I could make a couple videos and earn some money from it. And then I thought, okay, then I'll just sell it or something. And I literally used it every single day for 2 years. And then I've made probably 10 or 15 Adorama TV videos with the Osmo Pocket. You can't tell. And then the new one came out and all the little gripes I had with the first one fixed. So wider angle of view. It's got a remote, the Wi-Fi. Now it just plugs in this little thing on the bottom, so you can control it with your camera. It's got a built-in wireless mic receiver, so you can just plug in a law if it's remote controls
Oh,
the
fantastic.
thing.
That's cool.
You can plug it into external power, and it doesn't die. It just keeps going. And so you can record yourself. So I'll take the Osmo Pocket for a lot of the B-roll stuff when I'm in the studio and I have to have like overhead shots. I just stick it on a light stand and shoot the light stand as high as I can go. And then with my phone, I control the camera, and then you can start and stop it and all that stuff. And it's 4K. And so if you edit in 1080p, you can zoom in and out in different sections, and you have that, or you can have it follow. I mean, it's an insanely no-brain kind of a camera to get if you make videos.
So we have come to the end of Camera Shake Podcast, episode 53, with today's guest, Mark Wallace. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show. It was an absolute education.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I hope we can do it again sometime in the future, because this was a blast.
Oh, absolutely. Just let us know the next time you have internet connection and we'll get you back
do
on
it.
the show.
Okay.
Awesome. So if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you head over to camerashakepodcast.com and to join our community there. If you are listening to the audio version of this, you could just hop over to YouTube and check out our lovely faces in full Technicolor, if you so wish. Of course, remember, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell, whatever YouTube is trying to tell you, just do that. Also, I've noticed one thing. If you are listening to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, you can scroll down and leave us a little star rating and leave us a little review. That would be lovely, because that would mean that our show would be found in the great sea of podcasts. I've noticed there's been quite a few ratings coming in recently.
Yeah, it does make a difference. It really does make a difference. Otherwise, it's nigh on impossible to find
anything
in podcast world.
Anyway, that would help us out. Now, that being said, without further ado, we shall see you next Thursday.